In 1943, a weapon was fired inside the Oval Office, and nobody outside the room heard a thing. While the world knew World War II as thundering artillery and roaring bomber engines, a shadow war was fought with tools that were never supposed to exist: whisper-quiet pistols, ghost planes, and blades designed for one intimate, deniable purpose. This is every silent weapon used in World War II. Let's dive in. Silent firearms, pistols, and suppressed sidearms. When your mission can't afford a sound, you reach for a pistol that whispers instead of screams. The high-standard HDM was the OSS's signature silenced sidearm, a .22 LR, semi-automatic with an integral suppressor so effective it was demonstrated inside the White House. Agents called it nearly Hollywood quiet in real conditions. It became the gold standard for clandestine elimination behind enemy lines. Next up, the Welrod, possibly the most deliberately lethal object ever designed by a committee. This British SOE bolt-action pistol, chambered in 9mm or .32 ACP, was engineered from the ground up as a murder weapon, full stop. Its integral suppressor was built into the grip itself, producing a report barely louder than a hand clap. It had no trigger guard, no conventional safety, just a turn bolt action that you cycled slowly, manually, to keep the action silent. Partisans across occupied Europe carried it tucked into waistbands and coat linings. Then there's the Nagant M1895 revolver, the only revolver in history that could be effectively suppressed. Its unique gas seal mechanism pushed the cylinder forward to close the barrel gap on firing, eliminating the pressure leak that makes suppressing revolvers nearly impossible. Soviet NKVD operatives used it with a simple thread-on suppressor for close-quarters work where silence was survival. Finally, the Liberator FP45, not suppressed, but disposable. Stamped from 11 pieces of sheet metal, this single-shot .45 was airdropped by the millions into occupied territories. One shot, one dead German, one stolen rifle. The psychological effect alone was worth every penny of its $2.10 production cost. Silent long arms, suppressed rifles, and submachine guns. When a pistol's range isn't enough, but a rifle crack would get you killed, you reach for something in between. The Lisle Carbine is arguably the quietest shoulder-fired weapon ever built. British SOE engineers took a Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle, rechambered it for the subsonic .45 ACP pistol cartridge, and wrapped the entire barrel in an oversized integral suppressor. The result was a weapon so quiet that the loudest sound was the bolt cycling. Commandos used it for sentry removal in Norway and Southeast Asia. A single shot from the dark, and the guard simply dropped. No alarm, no chaos, mission intact. Next up, the Sten Mark II IS. The standard Sten was already a crude, cheap submachine gun, but the Mark II variant added an integral suppressor and a reduced velocity bolt to keep the 9mm rounds subsonic. SOE agents and SAS operators dropped into occupied France with these, using them for close-quarters ambushes and targeted assassinations. It was ugly, it was unreliable, and it was perfect for the job. Moving on to the M3 grease gun with suppressor kit. The Americans weren't far behind. The OSS fitted select M3 submachine guns with thread-on suppressors, issuing them to Jedburgh teams operating deep behind German lines. Fast, controllable, and whisper-quiet on subsonic .45 ACP. It became the American answer to the Sten 1IS. Finally, the Type 100 suppressed variant, Japan's contribution to the Silent War. Imperial intelligence units fielded suppressed versions of their standard submachine gun in the Pacific and China theaters, proving that clandestine warfare wasn't exclusively a Western obsession. Cold steel and impact weapons, knives, garrotes, and clubs. When even a suppressed firearm is one risk too many, you go back to the oldest tools in human history and make them terrifyingly modern. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife is the icon. Designed by two former Shanghai municipal police officers, William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes, who had actually killed men with blades in the back alleys of one of the world's most violent cities. The result was a double-edged stiletto with a foil grip, engineered not for cutting but for penetration. OSS and SOE operatives received mandatory FS knife training alongside their firearms instruction. It wasn't a tool, it was a philosophy, fast, deep, and final. Next up, the OSS thumb dagger. Exactly what it sounds like. A small, concealable blade, worn on the thumb, designed to be invisible during a pat-down search. When a German checkpoint guard got too close, the answer was already in the operative's hand. Deniable, intimate, terrifying in its simplicity. Moving on to the garrote wire, standard issue across SOE, OSS, and resistance networks. Piano wire or braided steel between two. Wooden or metal handles, no moving parts, no ammunition, no sound whatsoever. Resistance fighters in France and Yugoslavia used them on isolated sentries when even the Lisle would have been too loud. Finally, the Kosh and Sap, lead-weighted leather clubs issued to commandos for silent incapacitation. When the mission required a prisoner, not a corpse. Sometimes the quietest weapon is the one that doesn't kill at all. Silent transport, gliders, bicycles, and stealth insertion vehicles. A weapon is only as good as the operative carrying it. Getting behind enemy lines without making a sound was its own lethal art form. The Waco CG for a glider was America's silent spear tip. Towed to altitude by a C-47, then released to glide in complete engineless silence toward enemy territory. Used devastatingly at Operation Market Garden and the invasion of Sicily, these plywood and canvas aircraft carried up to 13 fully armed troops, or a jeep and crew, descending through darkness with nothing but wind noise to betray them. German sentries heard nothing until boots hit the ground. Next up, the Horsa glider, Britain's heavier answer. The Horsa could swallow a fully loaded jeep, an anti-tank gun, or 25 combat troops. On D-Day, 6 Horsas landed directly beside Pegasus Bridge in near-total darkness, delivering Major John Howard's company in what historians call the most precise airborne assault in history. The silence of that approach was the entire tactical advantage. Explosive and sabotage devices. Silent destruction. Silence wasn't just about the moment of killing. The most devastating silent weapons were the ones that did their work hours after the operative was already gone. The limpet mine was the SOE's signature calling card against enemy shipping. A magnetic, waterproof explosive charge that clamped directly onto a steel hull below the waterline. Set with a time delay pencil fuse, the operative was miles away, or back across the channel, before the detonation ever came. No firefight, no witnesses, just a German supply ship rolling onto its side in a quiet harbor at 3 a.m. Next up, the tire spike strip, the caltrop, ancient in concept, devastatingly modern in application. OSS and SOE supply drops included. thousands of these small steel spikes, designed to shred German vehicle tires on occupied roads. Resistance fighters scattered them across supply routes at night and vanished. No explosion, no sound, just a panzer column grinding to a halt in the French countryside. Moving on to the time pencil delay fuse, the silent weapon behind every silent weapon. This chemically activated detonator crushed a copper tube, releasing acid that slowly ate through a restraining wire, triggering the detonator anywhere from 10 minutes to 24 hours later. It gave operatives the most valuable tactical asset in clandestine warfare: time and distance from the blast. Finally, the sleeve gun. A last-resort assassination device small enough to conceal entirely up a jacket sleeve, firing a single .32 ACP round when the operative straightened their arm sharply. No draw, no warning. Designed specifically for close contact terminations where even reaching for a Welrod would be noticed. Cold, calculated, and surgical in its purpose. Experimental and psychological weapons, the strangest tools of the shadow. Not every silent weapon was designed to kill cleanly. Some were built to confuse, terrify, and destabilize. And some were so bizarre they barely made it out of the laboratory. America's most unhinged weapons program of the entire war. The OSS and US military developed small incendiary capsules attached to live Mexican free-tailed bats, intended to be released over Japanese cities. The bats would roost in wooden structures, and the delayed incendiaries would ignite simultaneously across entire city grids. Tests proved it genuinely worked, accidentally burning down a U.S. Army Air Force hangar and a general's car in the process. It was shelved only when the Manhattan Project took priority. Moving on to the Biano grenade, designed to look and feel like a baseball, because American soldiers were statistically better at throwing baseballs than standard grenades. It detonated on impact rather than with a time fuse, eliminating the catastrophic problem of enemies throwing them back. Introduced late in the war, soldiers who understood its impact detonation mechanism were reportedly terrified to carry it. Finally, the X-Craft Midget submarine. 4-man British submarines barely the size of a school bus, designed to creep silently into heavily defended Norwegian fjords and attach massive explosive charges directly to the keels of capital ships. Operation Source in 1943 saw X-Craft cripple the Tirpitz, Germany's most feared battleship, while she sat at anchor, surrounded by nets and destroyers. The crew heard nothing until the charges detonated beneath them. Which silent weapon would you have carried? The Welrod, the Lisle, or something even colder? Drop it in the comments. And if you learned something new today, the like button is the only sound we need.